far from cowardly, because we knew there would be blowback, and we did the right thing anyway.
So let me ask you about that, though. There was blowback. I think 250,000 people canceled their subscriptions. Do you think when you were doing this that some people were going to say that actually creates less trust in media? I mean, part of it was aimed at creating more trust in media. And at the same time, clearly there were other people saying maybe there's less trust.
No, I don't follow that logic.
You know, did you were surprised at the...
Not really. We knew that this was going to be perceived in a very good way. As I said, these things punch above their weight.
And we worried about that.
You can't worry. You can't do the wrong thing because you're worried about bad PR or whatever it is you want to call it. So this was the right decision. We made the right decision. I'm proud of the decision.
So let me just ask you just one related question, which is this. You said in your piece about this, that was fascinating. You said when it comes to the appearance of conflict, I'm not the ideal owner.
No, I'm a terrible owner
of the Post.
For the Post, from the point of view of appearance of conflict. I've like not a single day goes by where some Amazon executive or some Blue Origin executive or some Bezos Earth Fund leader isn't meeting with a government official somewhere. And so there are always going to be appearances of conflict.
And is that
a pure newspaper owner who only owned a newspaper and did nothing else would probably be, from that point of view, a much better owner? No. The advantage I bring to the Post is, when they need financial resources, I'm available. I'm like that. I'm a doting parent in that regard.
I think embedded underneath the fundamental question is this, and the Wall Street Journal wrote about it, the New York Times is writing about it. It's whether, and this was, I think, the question that people had, which was whether you had any worry in your mind about other businesses about Trump, and whether he would ultimately target Amazon or target Blue Origin as retaliation against negative coverage, given that you had lived through that.
No, I don't think so. That was certainly not in my mind, and I'm also very aware the Post covers all presidents very aggressively. It's going to continue to cover all presidents very aggressively, and this endorsement or non-endorsement isn't going to.
You did not think that was going to change it?
It's a drop in the bucket.
Anything, so
No, it won't change anything.
If he likes you, he likes you, and if he doesn't like you, he's not going to like you.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's a different question. But if we're talking about Trump, I think it's very interesting. I'm actually very optimistic this time around that we're going to see. I'm very hopeful about this. He seems to have a lot of energy around reducing regulation. And from my point of view, if I can help him do that, I'm going to help him. Because we do have too much regulation in this country. This country is so set up to grow. By the way, all of our problems, all of our economic problems, like if you look at the deficit, the debt, the national debt, how gigantic it is as a portion of GDP, these are real problems and they're real long-term problems. And the way you get out of them is by outrunning them. You're going to solve the problem of the national debt by making it a smaller percentage of GDP. Not by shrinking the national debt, but by growing the GDP. You have to grow the denominator. And that means you have to grow GDP at 3, 4, 5% a year. And, let the national debt grow slower than that. If you can do that, this is a very manageable problem. So we need a growth orientation in this country. This is the most important thing, a growth mindset. And we are the luckiest country in the world. We have all these natural resources, including energy independence. We have the best risk capital system in the world by far. So, people get confused about why does the United States have so much venture success, so much entrepreneurial success? Why are the big tech companies here and not somewhere else? What's really going on with all this dynamism in this country compared to what we see around elsewhere in the world. And there are a bunch of reasons for that, but the biggest one, 8 of 10 points there, is that we have better risk capital. So it's not the banking system. We have a good banking system, but so does Europe. What's different here is that you can raise, $50 million of seed capital to do something that only has a 10% chance of working. That's crazy. But the people who are giving you that seed capital know that their expected value is still positive in many cases, or they're at least gambling that's true. That risk capital system that we have in this country is turning out to be very hard for other countries to duplicate. So we have that. We have, we speak English, and English is turning into the lingua franca of the whole world. It's there's so many advantages here, but we are burdened by excessive permitting and regulation. You can't build a bridge and all these, you know what they are. We see these examples all the time. We need to be able to build solar fields and everything else.
You're optimistic about this president. The reason
I'm very optimistic that President Trump is serious about this regulatory agenda, and I think he has a good chance of succeeding.
What about the idea that he thinks that the press is the enemy?
Well, I think I'm going to try to talk him out of that idea. I don't think the press is the enemy, and I don't think he's also I've been on the last 2 years. He has to this is not the case. The press is not the enemy.
I hope you're right.
I hope I'm right too.
Have you talked?
Let's go persuade him of this. No,
Have you talked about it?
Let's go talk to him.
I think we can try.
I really don't. I think that this is absolutely. I don't think he's going to see it the same way. But you might be wrong.
Was that always your thought?
What I've seen so far is that he is calmer than he was first time and more confident, settled.
Let me ask one related question. I don't want to actually get into space, but it actually is an interesting segue to space, because we were talking earlier this morning to Sam Altman about Elon Musk. And Elon Musk's relationship with the press, interestingly. And there's been a lot of questions about whether there could be the possibility that Elon, given his proximity, would make things difficult for people who are his competitors. Elon, in the space context, is your biggest competitor.
Yes.
Does this concern you?
Well, they're certainly very able competitors. I mean, this is an arena where I have the.
No, I know he's a great competitor. No, does it concern you his proximity?
No, I was headed there. But I'm just saying they're certainly very good competitors, and no doubt about that. I take at face value what has been said, which is that he is not going to use his political power to advantage his own companies or to disadvantage his competitors. I take that at face value. I could be wrong about that, but I think it could be true. I think he probably is trying to, I think this Department of Government Efficiency and that he and Vivek are helping Trump with and so on. Again, I'd like to take, I've had a lot of success in life not being cynical. And I've very rarely been taken advantage of as a result. It's happened a couple of times, but not very often. And I think that cynicism, I'll be cynical about that. Let's go into it hoping that the statements that have been made are correct, that this is going to be done, above board in the public interest. And if that turns out to be naive, well, then we'll see. But I actually think it's going to be great. I'm hoping.
I'm glad you could address it. It's something I think we all want to know. By the way, before I get to space, Washington's question, just as I'm here, the big plan to save or fix the Washington Post is you being a great innovator as it comes to Amazon and everything else. Do you have a big idea about how the Post is going to change? Newspapers are going to change?
I have a bunch of ideas, and I'm working let's see, 2013, so 11 years ago. It took a couple of years. It made money for 6 or 7 years after that. The last few years, it's lost money again. And it needs to be put back on a good footing again. And the first time we did it by transitioning away from advertising to subscriptions and also away from being a local paper to being a national paper. And there are more details to it, but that was the basic formula that was used, and it was very successful. And we have a few new ideas, so stay tuned. We'll see.
Okay. Here's my question to you about space, which is I think a lot of us watched you. This was just weeks after you stepped down as CEO of Amazon. You went aboard with Shepard as its first crew flight. And I remember watching it on TV just like everybody else in 2001. And I know this is something that you wanted to do literally since you were a kid. I mean, I went back and looked. There were articles, letters, and people who said that when you were a child, you were talking about this. And so I was just curious if you could just take us back to that moment and what that felt like. Because you have now put all of your eggs now in this space basket. And what that was like and how that might have even shifted your thinking about
Put all of my eggs in the space basket.
you have a huge investment in space.
Yes, but it's not all my eggs.
Not all of them.
Yeah, no, I still have a huge investment in Amazon. I still spend a lot of time there too. I've actually worked hard. This retirement thing I've turned out to be extremely lame at, and so I'm waking up every morning and doing meetings from 9 to 7 and reading documents, and most of it is Blue Origin, but quite a bit of it is still Amazon too. That morning, we're going to space, and I'll tell you about the overview effect, which everyone knows. We've now sent 6% new Shepherds on our tourism vehicle. It takes people up in space. The whole journey takes 11 minutes. You're in space for 4 minutes. You go up above the climate line, 100 kilometers up. You see the curvature of the Earth and then the Earth's atmosphere. It truly is a life-changing, transformative thing. Every astronaut, everybody who's ever been to space has felt this, and it has a name. It's called the overview effect. Jim Lovell, the Apollo 13 astronaut and later moonwalker, has a beautiful quote. When he saw the Earth from space, he looked back and said, "I realize don't go to heaven when you die, go to heaven when you're born." And that's how beautiful this planet is. And you may have seen Shadow when he flew on New Shepard, and he came back and saw everything, the blackness, and how there's the nothingness, and he described it as death, and said, "Look, this is the one little pool of life that we see in this entire solar system. It's truly incredible." It is a profound experience that's hard to describe. But that morning, something else happened to me that was very personal. We're getting ready to go at 4:45 in the morning, and my whole family is there. Some close friends, extended families, 35, 40 people there. And by the way, I'm on the first human flight of this vehicle. And so it's never flown people before. And my poor mother, what's worse is I'm bringing my brother with me. So it's me and my brother. And we wake up getting ready to go to the launch site. And kind of, we weren't really expecting everybody, of course, is awake and there to say goodbye. But they thought they were saying goodbye forever. And it was surprising to me that I wasn't expecting this, but they were genuinely terrified for us. But it was paradoxically for my brother and me, it felt really good to us because we got to see how lucky. And it was very, my kids and my sister and my mom and my dad and his close friends. And it's easy to know what's going on inside your own head. It's easy to know that you love people. very meaningful, very emotional. It was a kind of unexpected delivery. In fact, I talked to astronauts and what's in store for something special, but it was very interesting to have a feeling from my family to
the change in the way you thought about everything you do with Blue Origin, in terms of what this is all about. You've said that the reason we've got to go to space, in my view, is to save Earth. Is that coming from being up there and looking at that? Or is that something you think about?
For whatever reason, since I'm a teenager, and in fact, there's a high school newspaper article when my Palmetto Senior High, they wrote an article about my space plans, which I won't tell everyone who stands still long enough. Those plans included what I still think I'm still working on, which is moving all polluting industry off Earth. And so my view, I know that sounds fantastical, so I beg the indulgence of this audience to bear with me for a moment, but it's not fantastical. This is going to happen, and we need to lower the cost of access to space low enough, and that's what New Glenn, our orbital vehicle, is all about. That's the big super heavy launch vehicle that's now, it's literally on the pad now, waiting for regulatory approval. It is final regulatory approvals to launch, so we're very, very close. And if we can lower the costs enough, we will, but it may take, who knows how many years it will take, but if we can set up the preconditions where the next generation or the generation after that will be able to move polluting industry off Earth. And then this planet will be maintained as it should be, can kind of be, you can sort of think of it as zoned residential and light industry. And if you want to use large amounts of energy and large amounts of pollutants and so on, you go do that off Earth. And so we get the best of both. We get to have this energy-intensive civilization and use ever more energy per capita and get all the benefits that we get from that, which are many, by the way. You don't want to go back in time. And it's really important to think about, when people talk about the good old days, that is such an illusion, that almost everything is better today than it was. Infant mortality is better, global illiteracy is better, global poverty is far better. Things really are better today. There's one exception here, which is the natural world. The natural world, if you go back to 500 years, pristine oceans, pristine rivers, pristine forests, and that is, that's part of the trade movement, is we're kind of, we're using up the natural world here. But space has infinite, for all practical purposes, infinite energy, infinite raw materials.
So it's a very interesting philosophical choice. It's one of the things you're talking about trying to save the Earth. And I was going to say that a number of people, including I think Musk and others, say that we need an escape hatch from Earth, right? We need to all move to Mars because Earth is not going to be saved. Do you see that?
No, we have to save. So first of all, there is no plan B. We have to save Earth. So we've sent robotic probes to all of the planets in this solar system. This is the good one. And we must save it. We cannot, look, we can live, we can choose how we want to live. It is not impossible if you think about climate change and so on, some of the issues that we face here, because of the way we're doing things currently. You can imagine a world with enough technological sophistication where we can turn Earth into sort of a giant spaceship,
Fantastical. No, I know.
I'd say air-conditioned planet, and kind of pave the whole thing and turn that's a bad future. We don't need to do that. That turning Earth into, and change the whole thing and turn it into a human construct and destroying this natural ecosystem when it's so unique and such a gem. That's not the right way to do it. So we should move all that off Earth. And we will, but we won't do it the wrong way. And you know why we won't? Because humans value beauty and art. I have a ranch in West Texas. It's actually also where the launch site for the suborbital vehicle is. And on that ranch, you can, in many different places, you can go and find, arrowheads of ancient pottery. And some of the pottery is 7,000 years old. And it is, and that was a hard, scrabble, subsistence level life. And that pottery is decorated. So here are these people who are in a desert environment, scraping for water, food, and they're taking the time to paint their pottery. What does that tell you about our values? And what humans who value beauty are not going to destroy this planet.
Let me ask you two other related space questions. I had the opportunity to go tour Blue Origin in the fall, and one of the things that everybody down there talks about is this idea of getting the moon and then using the moon. In fact, the phrase that one of your colleagues said was, when you use the moon, it's like JFK, the airport. Like JFK, the airport. Because we're going to send stuff to the moon, and then from the moon, then we're going to go to Mars. It's like a pit stop along the way. And I thought that was sort of very interesting thought process.
There's a very strong argument to be made that the moon is a good stepping stone to the rest of the solar system. And the reason for that is the moon has a much lower gravity level than the Earth, and because it has a lot of very important minerals, and also water in the form of ice and the permanently shattered craters at the poles of the moon. And ice can be converted, water can be converted into hydrogen and oxygen, which happen to be the very best, highest performing rocket propellants. And so you can, it takes, to raise a kilogram of mass from the Earth, it takes 28 times as much energy as raising that same kilogram from the moon. So to the degree that you can get raw materials from the moon, which is, again, we're talking about a couple of generations in the future, but to the degree that you can get raw materials from the moon instead of from Earth, those materials will allow you to build spaceships and to fuel those spaceships and to build solar arrays and all these other things that you want to do, but using lunar resources instead of Earth resources. And then it would provide a very convenient stepping stone to the rest of the solar system.
Dave Limp, we just hired to run Blue Origin for you as the CEO, said apparently when he was interviewing with you, he said, Jeff, is Blue Origin a hobby or a business?
Yeah. It's a business. It's not a very good business yet. We're investing. No, look, I think it's going to be, from a business point of view, from a financial returns point of view, I think it's going to be the best business that I've ever been involved in. But it's going to take a while.
So bigger than Amazon?
Yeah.
So let me ask you a different question, which is, I remember just being down there, the scale of everything. I wish you could all just go and see it. It's so remarkable. You sort of look at the scale, and you can't even understand what is happening around you. It's sort of so hard to fathom just the size of it. And it made me think about confidence. We were actually talking to Serena Williams today about confidence. And I was thinking to myself,
It's easy for her if she just has to be the best in the world.
well, but this is going to go to you too, which is, when you started Amazon, that was a business that had to scale. You had to see the scale to work. I remember for years I was covering, writing about losing money left, right, and center. Everyone thought this whole thing was crazy, and the scale of money, the scale of it, people think I thought it was insane.
Yes.
And if you go down to Florida, to Cape Canaveral, and you see the scale of this thing, you say, "My God, this is insane."
Tom Brokaw interviewed me one time about Amazon's losses, and he looked at me and he said, Mr. Bezos, can you even spell profit? And I said, yes, P-R-O-P-H-E-T.
So where do you think your confidence, though, comes from to create a business that requires such scale? Most people like to, they take one foot and then put the other foot in, and they want to be able to see where they're going. And I would argue, in the case of Amazon, in the case of space, you can't see where. I mean, maybe you can see where you're going, but a lot of people actually struggle to see.
Well, I think for a very good question, very interesting question, and I'm not sure I know the right answer, or maybe there are many answers, so let's start with that. But one observation I would have is that I think it's generally human nature to overestimate risk and underestimate opportunity. And so I think entrepreneurs in general, would be well advised to try and bias against that piece of human nature. The risks are probably not as big as you perceive, and the opportunities may be bigger than you perceive. And so when you look at you say it's confidence, but maybe it's just trying to compensate for that accepting that that's a human bias and trying to compensate against it. The second thing I would point out is that thinking small is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Now, when you think about this stuff, because you were doing this at a very young age, this is not something. This is something that a wise and old man would say. But I only say it because it was very early. I remember watching on 60 Minutes. This is maybe 1999, and at the end of the interview, they were asking about whether this whole thing can work or not. And you said it's not a fear that it can't work; it's a fact that it might not.
Right. That is true.
But I remember seeing that, thinking, and you just said it in a sort of matter-of-fact kind of way. Just to say, did you say to yourself, "There's a massive risk. This is not really going to happen"?
I took to raise the first $1 million of seed capital for Amazon. So I sold 20% of the company at a $5 million valuation. Sold 20% of the company for $1 million to 22 angel investors, roughly $50,000 each. And I had to take 60 meetings. So whatever, roughly 40 of them said no, and 22 or so said yes. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. This was 1995-ish, 1995, and the first question was, what's the internet? Everyone would know what the internet was. And the 40 no's were hard-earned no's. Like, they were just no. They were me, multiple meetings, working really hard, trying to get people to write that $50,000 check. And the whole enterprise could have been extinguished then. And I do remember in those meetings, I would always tell people I thought there was a 7% chance they would lose their investment. And in retrospect, I think that might have been a little naive. But I think it was true. In fact, if anything, I think I was giving myself better than the real odds.
What do you think the real odds are in space with Blue Origin?
Blue Origin doesn't have the same level of financing risk. So, because I can finance Blue Origin with my Amazon stock. So, I think Blue Origin has a lot of runway. Blue Origin is going to do some very amazing things here. And it's, and by the way, Amazon is doing amazing things. I saw some of our announcements yesterday. I hope, the Nova foundational models are truly incredible. There's a bunch of stuff going on. The world is so empty right now. We're in multiple golden ages at once. And, I'm also very interested in robotics. I'm not doing that directly, but I'm investing in a number of robotics companies. I'm a big believer in it. I think there's never been a more extraordinary moment to be alive. We're so lucky.
I want to go back to Amazon for a second. Actually, like you just mentioned, the fundraising for Amazon at the outset.
Yes.
One of the things that I noticed recently, and you made for a while, I've been asking you this, is throughout your whole career at Amazon, it appears to me like you paid yourself about $80,000 a year in total, your cash comp, and never took additional equity in the company the entire time.
various things, more than 20% of the company. And it was, I just felt, how could I possibly make more incentive than owning such a, and most founders own big chunks of the company. They don't really need, they're more like owner operators. The way they increase their wealth is not by getting more equity. They just want to make the equity they have more valuable. And so I just would have felt icky about it. And I'm actually very proud of that decision. I sometimes wish that there were and maybe you can do this, Andrew, or maybe the Washington Post will do this, but somebody needs to make a list where they rank people by how much wealth they've created for other people. And so instead of the Forbes list, it rates you by your own wealth. So, Amazon's market cap is 2.3 trillion today. I own about, 200 billion-ish of it. So if you take 2.3 billion and subtract out the piece I got for myself, then, I've created something like 2.1 trillion of wealth for other people. That should put me pretty high on some list. And that's a better list. How much wealth have you created for other people? People like Jensen and Infobee is going to be very high on that list. And that would be a pretty cool list. Somebody should do that list.
That is a very good list. How does the idea of your own influence sit with you? Do you think about that? Do you appreciate that? That you are one of the most powerful people in the world, frankly, given your connections to Amazon, given Lincoln Reports, given all the other things that you're investing in Washington Post?
I don't. It's a fair question. I don't think about it that way. I don't wake up and think, how do I exercise my power today? I wake up and follow my curiosity. I've always been a wanderer, and our Amazon meetings, I want crisp documents and messy meetings. I want the meetings to wander. The only meeting I'm ever on time to is my first one, because I won't finish a meeting until I'm totally finished.
This is a boss. What about everybody else?
They have to wait for me. But that, this is, I try to teach, really wandering in the meetings. There's certain kinds of meetings that are like open business review or something, where it's like a set pattern and you're going through it. That can have an agenda very crisp. That's a great meeting. But most of the meetings that are useful, we do these 6-page memos, we do half-hour study hall, we read them, and then we have a messy discussion. So I like a memo should be like angels seeing us from high. It's so clear and beautiful. And then it can be messy.
How messy can it be?
I completely.
No, I ask that because culturally, right now, and there's so many people in the room here who go to meetings and we don't know how messy it can be. I mean that because you don't know whether you really can raise your hand and say, this idea is completely insane.
I am very skeptical of meetings like this. At one time, it doesn't happen very often because it's kind of verboten at Amazon. But I could tell in the meeting that the team had rehearsed the meeting.
That happens.
I could just feel it. You can tell the little tiny cues. And I tried to say, did you guys rehearse this meeting? And they're like, yes. I said, don't do that again. You don't need to. Because here's what, maybe you would rehearse a sales meeting, right? If you're going, if you're going to go visit a customer and you're trying to sell them a new product or something, maybe you want to have all your ducks in a row. And you want to put your best foot forward.
But that's really interesting.
You're seeking truth, not a pitch. I don't want to be pitched. And you don't want any of your senior executives to be pitched. And that's why messy is good. And you also want to be early. It's like you don't want the whole thing to be figured out and then presented to you. You want to be part of the sausage making. Show me the ugly bits. And I was asking, are there any dissenting opinions on the team? I want to try to get to the controversy. Like, let's make this meeting messy. Help me make it messy.
How hard is it for you to do that?
I go last too.
Or you go, yes, I've heard about this.
Everybody, we try to go in kind of similar order, so the most junior person goes first, the most senior person goes last, and it helps with groupthink.
Because if you say, what's going to happen? What happens if you have already come up with your view?
Well, I don't want to torture people, so in that rare case where I actually know that nothing can change my mind, I will just say, look, guys, nothing is going to change my mind. So, like, let's not waste a lot of time. I don't want to, it shouldn't be a charade. But that's a very rare case. I'm actually personally very easy to influence. Something I've realized later in my life, just maybe starting 10 years ago or so, I realized I'm a very easy person to influence. I change my mind a lot. People talk to me and I take in information and I change it easily. But a couple of percent of the time, no force in the world can move me because I'm so sure of something that we're thinking of. I can't tell you how many people tried to talk me out of fulfillment by Amazon as an example. I just knew. And I was like, you guys, you will never talk me out of this. We're going to do this. I will do this in sheer force of belief.
Do you think that you have that? This actually something that I think a lot of people contend with. Do you think you have to project confidence?
No, I don't. I've gotten. Well, this is a little bit of a personal story in a way, but I have gotten more intimate, I would say, in the last. We've gotten older, so maybe the last 10 or 15 years, and my upbringing, I have a really supportive family, but in our family there were some unspoken rules, which I think probably most of us have unspoken rules of one kind or another, and in mine, all the positive emotions were optimism, happiness, joy, but only really the only negative emotion that was kind of tolerated in that unspoken family dynamic, and only occasionally, was anger, sadness, fear, anxiety. These things were looked down on, and that's probably in the scheme of things probably pretty helpful for founding a company. It's like you're probably most of it focus on positive things anyway. And you need optimism. Without optimism and energy, I don't know how some glum ego type founder could ever lead a company to success. I mean, you've got to have some optimism, you've got to have some energy. It's got to be a little contagious. There's going to be a lot of bad days. You've got to lift people up. So you need that. But what I have figured out over the last, especially started with my own family and my close relationships, my children, and my brother and sister, parents, and so on, is I realized, like, I'm not really being intimate with them if I'm not sharing when I'm sad or sharing when I'm scared or these kinds of things. And so I started working on that with them and found it very meaningful. I could deepen those relationships very significantly. And then I realized those were valid emotions at work too. And so it turns out, like, they're more precise. All of your emotions are sort of an early warning system. If you're stressed, for me, that's a kind of a radar that is detecting that if there's something I'm taking action on, it's an important indicator. And it turns out if you're channeling all of your negative emotions into occasionally frustration or anger or something like that, you're not being very precise. It's much better now. Like, I'll have a meeting and it listens for a while, and when it's my turn to talk, and say, I'm scared. But that's more effective. People are like, you're you, or not just your family relationships, your close intimate relationships, but I think it helps your work too.
Here's an Amazon question. Amazon is very
For sure.
You stepped away from that.
Yeah.
What did that feel like? How hard was that for you? And what is it like now?
Well, even when Amazon was a tiny company, for whatever reason, I always had in my mind that I wanted to build a company that would outlast me. And so I've always been thinking about it in that framework and how you could kind of grow up into a young adult and be set off into the world successfully and independently. And that's very different. You can build companies in different ways. You don't have to do that. You can have big changes of $1,000. And that's also can be very successful. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just it wasn't what I wanted. And it was. I felt like a parent sitting, be like with your kids go off to college or when they graduate from college, and you're hoping that you've created this independent child, now adult, young adult, who can go off into the world. You don't want them to be dependent on you. If they are, you failed. And I've always preached inside the company and to myself that no one is indispensable. I think it's most important for CEOs to look themselves in the mirror every day and say, I'm not indispensable. And so I want Amazon to go off without me. And I'm still at Amazon, by the way. I have a fully, and I am a parent, and I will, but I'm a 60-year-old man, and my mom and dad still worry about me. Right, so you never stop me in my hair. My heart is in Amazon, my curiosity is Amazon, my fears are there, my love is there. I'm never going to forget about Amazon. I'm always going to know. And right now I'm a long time in it because it's also I can help and it's super interesting. So why not? But this is the wrong way, in my view, to think about it. Big leaders only have to do a few things. If big leaders have to identify the big ideas. They have to enforce tough execution against those big ideas. And they need to grow the next generation of leaders. So that's really it. So two things. And so my job, one of my jobs right now is to make sure Andy, and Jackson and the whole leadership team are successful. I take that job very seriously.
As a parent,
yeah,
your kids can go off, but then once they do think you don't want the kids to do
Absolutely. I got kids in college age and just out of college. I still have to Venmo them money. Every once in a while, just happen. Just
we'll talk about what you subscribe and save to in just a moment. As you just said, you're very involved with it right now. What is it that you're doing at Amazon?
AI. Yeah, and so I think there are a few things, but it's 95% AI.
And where is it?
It's just so because we're literally working on 1,000 applications internally. So AI, you have to remember, modern AI, is a horizontal enabling layer. It can be used to improve everything. It can be in everything. This is most like electricity. I went to a brewery in Luxembourg many years ago now. In fact, this trip was one of the little tiny catalysts for the founding of AWS. And the brewery was 300 years old. This company making beer for 300 years. A lot of the biggest companies in all their breweries, by the way. I don't know why this is. And they were very proud of their history and had a museum. And in that museum, that time, that's what everybody did. If a hotel wanted electricity, they had their own electric generator. And I looked at this and I thought, this is what computation is like today. Everybody has their own data center. And that's not going to last. It makes no sense. They're going to buy a computer off the grid. That's AWS. We were doing it internally at Amazon for ourselves, and the APIs for creators. That's a very interesting story. It's all right, but this is, these kind of horizontal layers, like electricity and compute, and now artificial intelligence. They go everywhere. There isn't. I guarantee you, there is not a single application that you can think of that's not going to be made better by AI.
Where do you think Amazon is in this? We're talking about large language models.
Yeah.
All day we talked to Sam, we talked to Sundar. Clearly, AWS has a big opportunity. On the language model piece, does it have its own? Does it matter?
I've been so busy, Andrew. You did not see.
I did see
Our
yesterday.
announcements yesterday.
I did see
About Nova.
Yes.
Well, that is a large language model, and it is our own.
And do you believe that model is competitive with
Yes.
other models?
It is absolutely competitive. So it is, benchmarks extraordinarily well. It's a world-class foundation model. It's a frontier model. And it's very, very price performant.
Do you think that all those things we were talking about earlier become commoditized, the models themselves?
I don't think they'll be exactly commoditized, but I think there will be, I think models will end up being specialists in certain, they'll be better at slightly, some will have lower latency, some will be, better calling APIs. There will turn out to be a bunch of flavors, just like you might not consult, if you're phoning a friend and consulting somebody, you're not always going to consult the same person for everything. It won't be exactly like that, because this kind of intelligence that we're creating is a little alien. It's very different from human intelligence in certain ways. These transformers, these artificial generative AI. So there will, I think even a single application is likely to call multiple AI models, depending on what. Some will be lower cost because they have a small number of parameters, and every once in a while you'll have to call the really big model. The big models are mostly going to be used, probably mostly, but they'll certainly be often used as teacher models. So, this is what we announced yesterday with Nova. There are 4 classes of model. There's the giant, frontier model, but that model, distilled down to the smaller models that are more cost effective, have lower latency, and can provide different levels of intelligence. So that's a really, this whole thing is fascinating. It's, by the way, also one of the ways, it's very interesting to think about how alien this kind of, in some ways, these models are already smarter than humans because they're more multidisciplinary. It's very difficult for a human to, be an expert in. Even if you're a doctor, you really have to specialize. You can
Does it excite you or scare you?
Oh, it excites me. I'm not. Are you making noise?
No, I'm not scared. I do talk about sort of human, what it's going to mean to be a human when this is all.
Well, so I've had this conversation with various people about what it means to be human, and people say, well, if AI is smarter than us, better than us, various things, won't that take the meaning out of your life or some question along these lines? And I said, look, I consider myself to be a very good writer, but I know people who are much better writers than I am. And in fact, I don't think there's any single thing that I'm the best in the world at. If I'm really honest with myself, I can almost find something. I know people who are better than me in math. I know people who are better than me in dancing, that's for sure. So, like really go right down the line, I can always find somebody better. And yet that doesn't take friends and the people in your community.
You're going to get meaning from that. I think technology can make that better. Because we're talking to Terry earlier. He clearly thinks that social media, and I don't agree on social media.
I am on social media sometimes, and
You say sometimes.
well, I am not addicted to social media. I go in and look, and I try to mine it for ideas sometimes, and it is it's a lot of work to find the little nuggets of where there are some. Like I follow a bunch of people who I think are really smart, and if I can stay just on those, but invariably the algorithm captures my attention and takes me down a different path.
I've seen you. You're very good at compartmentalizing. Meaning, you won't put the phone down.
I never pick up my.
Is that a natural act, though?
It's easy for me. I'm a serial multitasker. So I'm very, very focused. When I was in Montessori school, they told my mom that I was problematic because I wouldn't switch tasks. And my teacher would have to pick my whole chair up and move me in my chair to the next task. And so it's easy for me. If I'm at dinner with friends, I'm at dinner. I do not amazing thing. It's not hard for me. That is hard for me. I'm a good focuser.
That's hard for me. Two other things. There are these different buckets. Obviously, we've talked about Blue Origin, which is spent a lot of your time on, and Amazon. And then I see you making investments in robotics and AI and other things, and obviously the Earth Fund. What is the day like for you? How do you sort of see it?
I work from about 9 to 7 in meetings. I mean, it's meetings from 9 to 7. And then I have a bunch of documents I read outside of that. I get energy from that. I've always done that. You can't start a company unless you're willing to work really hard. And not all the work is fun. That's why they call it work. A lot of it is fun, but I would feel if you get half your job to be fun, you're crushing it. You got to have your expectations set right. If you come out of college and think like 100% of your job is going to be fun, you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
Here's my final question for you. You don't do this at all.
Do these interviews?
And I'm curious because I do. You must read about yourself occasionally. A little bit through social media.
Oh, I definitely see things sometimes, like the non-endorsement decision. That wasn't very nice or something.
So I'm curious what you think the world misunderstands. We all read about you all the time. We see you in pictures, all sorts of things everywhere. And I'm curious what you think when you sort of see the projected version of Jeff Bezos and the real Jeff Bezos. It's actually the reason I wanted you to be here. Because I've had the opportunity to get to know you over the years. I'm curious though, from your vantage point, what you see as the thing that the public doesn't.
Well, what an interesting. I wasn't expecting any questions like this. Let me think about this. they just dominate the entire conversation. You know, like in my case, it would be wealth or something like this. People would say, you know, it's very hard if you're, you know, I had a very funny moment on stage with Bill Gates once. It was shortly after I had become the wealthiest person in the world. I had taken that title from Bill. The title was, you know, I'll tell you, I promise you, I had never saw it. And in the interview, the two of us, I can't remember who the moderator was, but we said, Bill, how do you feel about this guy stealing the #1 wealthiest person title? And before Bill could answer, I looked at Bill and said, you're welcome. Because of course it's not, it's actually just that particular thing is to be dominant in our culture. Kind of people over focus on it and then they think we're focused on it, which isn't really true. It's, you know, in my case, I think of myself as an inventor. That's what I am. And I wake up every day and I follow my curiosity and I explore. And I really am an inventor. I'm very good at that. I'm a very good lateral thinker. And I love problems and I love a whiteboard and I love having a team of other smart people and we work together and we find unusual solutions to things. And that's how I think of myself. So like if I could somehow have a Forbes list of inventors, and if I could climb my way to the top of that inventor list, that's what would make me, and then I'd be understood, or at least in part. But I don't, somehow, I think you have to decide too as a public figure, how much energy do you want to put into being understood? Because you can spend a lot of time, and it probably still wouldn't work. So, you know, it probably helps to do an occasional interview like this. I did Lex, I did Lex for 3 minutes. I've done a couple of things, and so you don't want to be so mistaken.